So now that we've talked about the economic prosperity of the 1920s, we're going to look into the actual causes of the Great Depression. So one of the main issues or the main causes of the Great Depression was the overproduction of goods. Many industries began to struggle during the 1920s. You have the railroad, steel, textile, coal, and lumber industries whose profits decreased. Booming industries were not safe either. The housing industry began to slow down, and jobs in related industries decreased. Some industries continued to increase production. Now, in economics, which is what we cover in my 12th grade class, whenever you have a surplus of something, it's not a good thing. It depends. But in this situation, it's not a good thing because that means that these people were actually going to lose money. So they start to invest money to produce and make things. But when they can't sell it, it just means that they have lost that money. So if you look at the pictures here, a steel mill in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania with rail cars, a miner loading coal, and a sawmill in Michigan. So we have the agricultural crisis. Now this is about farmers. During World War I, like we said in the last notes, the demands for crops soared because they were trying to feed the soldiers. Prices also increased. So that means these farmers were actually making a very good living off of this industry during this time. So as a result, the farmers planted more crops, so they had to take out loans for supplies to get better equipment. However, the war did not last forever. When the demand dropped, the prices fell 40%, and the farmers had already increased production. So because of that, prices fell more. Because if you were trying, let's say you've overproduced something, in this case farmers, for example, they now have to lower their prices to try to get people to purchase any of it. They can't keep their prices that high. It's just not gonna, it's not gonna work. The farmers, as a result, could not pay back their debts, and banks would then foreclose on their properties to settle, so they lost their farms. Many small banks in rural areas also began to fail because they were not receiving their payments from these farmers. It's a chain reaction. Congress tried to help, but President Calvin Coolidge vetoed the McNary-Hahn bill that was supposed to get involved to help. If you look up at the picture here, it shows the new technologies such as this mechanical digging made farming easier. And this is a picture, it says, of a farmers in financial hardship. Uneven distribution of income. This is another reason for the Depression. During the 1920s, the income of the average American increased by 9%. The income of the wealthiest 1% increased 75%. The rich got richer and the poor became poorer. Excuse me. The income needed for a decent standard of living in this 1920s time period was about $2,500 a year. Now, you might say, how is that possible, Miss Dunn? Because now it's not. $2,500 is not anything. And that is because, of inflation. And we will get to that a little bit later. Over 70% of Americans' families earned less than this. Most struggled to buy necessities. Most Americans did not even have electricity. This is a woman who is shopping at a grocery store. We also see an increase in consumer debt because if you remember, we talked about how a lot of people were purchasing things on credit, not actual money that they had. They were buying things on credit, and eventually you run out. Many Americans could not purchase the new goods and services produced in the 20s, so again, banks were giving out credit to people they should not be giving credit to. Consumers did not have to have cash, so that means they were able to borrow money and repay it plus interest fees. As Americans purchased items using credit, their consumer debt increased. So again, the banks kind of were also at fault for this because they should not have given these people credit loans. job losses and less wages. So the workers' wages remain stagnant or even decreased. Stagnant remains the same, and then when you decrease, that means you're losing. The price of goods and services increased. So people were, losing work, and prices continue to increase. Americans did not have extra money to spend, and money struggled to pay back their consumer debt. Businesses were now left with a surplus of goods that they could not sell. So that means, just so you know, like for you to produce something, let's say you wanted to produce a lamp or a car, it costs money to produce these items. When you're a business and you invest money into these items to produce them and you can't sell them, that means that you as a business has lost money. So these businesses were losing thousands and thousands of dollars, which hurt their business. As a result, they have to lay off workers. When they lay off workers, these people who had bought things using credit now could not pay things back. And like I said, it was this vicious cycle of debt. It was bad for the economy. The election of 1928. It encouraged Americans about the outlook of the economy. You have a Republican, Herbert Hoover, who ran against Democrat Alfred E. Smith. Hoover had less experience, but had been the Secretary of Commerce under former President Warren Harding and current President Coolidge. Hoover gained voters and won because of the economic prosperity of the 1920s. He promised to keep the economy strong, however, it did not remain that way. Now, here's what we will discuss here. The stock market. The stock market kind of gives us an idea, or it basically shows what the economy is doing. If the stock market is high, it means that businesses are selling. Businesses are selling products, that people are purchasing products. It shows that there is a good circulation of money coming through the economy. Stock prices had been steadily rising at this point in time. If you're a business and your stocks are worth, a good amount of money, that just shows that the economy is strong. By 1923, some invested in the stock market. By 1929, 3% of Americans owned shares of stocks. These stocks were from different businesses. So for today, for example, if you wanted to purchase a stock in the Disney company, let me show you how much that would cost. You'd be very surprised. Oops, let me go back. I can't get my screen to... Let's do this. Okay, here we go. So let me show you. Stock price. We'll look at Apple. Okay, so we got Apple, we got Tesla. So Apple stocks have actually gone down. That could be due to different things. So their stock, to purchase one share in the Apple company, it's $112.82. Okay, let's see. Another business that is well known right now, we have Tesla. Oops. So this is the Tesla company. See, their business is actually booming right now because of the electric car industry. So to purchase one share in the Tesla Corporation, it costs $330.21. It's gone down recently. Not anything really to worry about. Let's look at Disney. Disney shares are on the up. To purchase a share in the Disney company, it is $134.20. I suspect, I don't know if any of you have seen the new Mulan movie. I think that will affect them negatively because a lot of people are saying that it was not... See, we've got Boycott Mulan. A lot of people did not like the new Mulan movie. So we'll see how that affects their stock prices later. But whenever some business... They publish something, they release a new item, they, create something new. Depending on how the public receives it or how much they purchase of that item, it will affect the business and their stock shares. So, Most of these people who owned shares of stocks were already wealthy, but some Americans had hoped to strike it rich. You can make money off of the stock market. However, it's one of those things that you don't take your money out all the time. Like, you leave your money there, invest in a company, invest in shares that you think are going to do well in the future, and you let your money grow over time. It's not a get rich quick scheme, which is what a lot of these people did. Again, the stock market is something that you have to be smart about. Coach Hill is actually somebody who really invests in the stock market. I recommend that you talk to him if you've got any other questions. Maybe your parents or your grandparents might have stocks. So you could definitely talk to them about it. But this is one of those ways that you can kind of increase your wealth over time. But again, you need to research what company that you're actually investing in, and make sure that it's not just some get rich quick, company. So back to this. Some of these Americans, they bought shares based on speculation. They didn't think about the risk. So some borrowed money to buy stocks. This is a terrible idea because, again, you're borrowing money off of credit. The government did not regulate the market, and so during this time, the stock market soared. The value in 1925 was $27 billion. In 1929, it was $87 billion. And this is the New York Stock Exchange, this building right here, and it is still there today. So the stock market crashes. During this time, many companies' stocks rose in price, but the worth of the companies did not actually rise. Many continued to ignore the risks. At some point, the bottom would fall out, and these people were going to have to figure out how to pay these things back. In September of 1929, stock prices fell, and some investors sold their stocks. In October 24th, stock prices fell lower and 13 million shares were sold. As shares are sold, the prices drop even more. So on October 29th, the stock market officially crashed. This is the inside of the New York Stock Exchange. It's never been that empty. Usually there's people running around trying to get deals and things. I'll have to show you a little clip. This is a crowd that formed outside the New York Stock Exchange after the stock market crashed. October 29th was known as Black Tuesday. 16 million shares were sold, but millions were left unsold. And at that point in time, those stocks were essentially worthless. People had used credit to buy stocks, were left with high debt and worthless shares. So that means that their shares meant nothing, and they still had to pay back their debt plus the shares. So like we said, you saw those shares. If you had multiple shares of $130 or $20, depending on the time period, you now had to pay all of that back plus interest on your debt or your credit. Many, because of this, lost their life savings. By the following month, investors had lost around $30 billion. And by 1932, the stock market was only worth $15 billion. This is a picture of the trading floor of the New York Stock Exchange in April of 1930. Now, banks and businesses fail. 90% of Americans did not invest in the stock market, but they still felt the consequences. So as a result of this poor effort on the stock exchange, the government failing to regulate the stock exchange, now it has affected the entire economy. People panicked and they tried to take their money out of the banks. So this was known as run on the banks. Now, what you need to know is that when you invest your money, or if you put your money into a bank, right, you know how much you have in your checking account. But if you were to ever try to go and withdraw that money in cash, you would not be able to get all of it. Because the bank does not just take your money and leave it there. The bank will also loan money out to other people. That's how banks make money. They give loans and they charge interest. So if you were to ever go and demand that all of your money be taken out, if everybody were to do that, the banks would shut down, which is what happened during the 1920s. 11,000 of the 25,000 banks failed, which means that millions lost all their money. Their entire life savings were gone. This is a picture of people who were waiting, lined up outside a closed bank wanting to withdraw their money in 1933. And this is a picture of what became common in New York City, where you have a bread line. And these people are basically have lost it all and were just trying to feed themselves. And they were going to these areas where you could get a free meal. Banks and businesses fail. In 90,000 businesses went bankrupt, even the prosperous ones. The gross domestic product. This is what we measure of what the country is producing. Okay, so your gross domestic product, you're looking at everything that the country is producing and how much money is coming out of that. So in 1929, the gross domestic product was $104 billion, which just shows how strong it was, the prosperity, the inventions, things like that. But by 1932, the GDP was only $59 billion. So you see how much the economy suffered. Workers were laid off. In 1929, there were 1.5 million workers unemployed, but by 1932, there were 15 million. Soup kitchens and bread lines became common. Homelessness also increased. Now, as a result of this, you have a worldly depression because other countries fell into a depression which also hurt America's economy. If you can't trade with other countries because they're also hurting, it's making it worse for you. So as a result, Americans spent less, so foreign imports weren't selling. Foreign businesses also saw less profits. Other countries imported fewer American goods, and the European stock market also suffered. In 1930, they passed the Smoot-Hawley Tariff Act, which raised taxes on imports in hopes Americans would buy more American-made goods. That did not work. That was an epic fail. The world trade dropped. Foreign businesses failed, and there was mass job loss. The unemployment rates increased around the world, and many countries increased or raised their own tariffs, which eventually will make the situation worse. So imagine if I'm the United States and I decide to put a tax on European goods of, let's say, 50%. So anytime they want to bring something over to sell in the United States, I'm going to charge them 50% on top of that. Okay, great. Well, if let's say they want to do the same thing to me, they want to charge me 50%, it's not going to work out great for anybody, okay? So if other countries, major countries, are dealing with a depression era themselves, that is not the way to solve it. You don't add more tariffs on top of tariffs. So, in 1933, the world trade decreased by 40%. And that is the end of this section. We'll get into more next.